يهده الله فلا مضل. Best definition I've heard for it is that your character is made up of those things about you that don't change according to circumstance. So if a person is generous, if she's a generous person, she's going to be generous with abundance and even generous with limited resources, because generosity is a part of her character. If clemency or being forgiving is a part of your character, you will seek forgiveness whether you are you will forgive people whether you are in a position of advantage or disadvantage, because being a clement person is a part of your character, right? We are reading a traditional book about this topic, and we've arrived to the end of the book. We've arrived to the section in which the author, taking from different sources in the Quran and in the prophetic tradition, he is addressing the reader as though he's speaking from the perspective of God. And he says, how can your existence be proved through that whose existence is contingent upon you? Can something other than you be more manifest than you, such that it could make you manifest? Since when were you absent, such that you would require proof of your presence? And since when did you become so distant that worldly impressions would become that which delivers unto you? So now he's speaking to God. And he says, who are we to even think that it is our right to affirm the existence of God? He says, how can your existence be proven by the one whose existence is contingent upon you? Meaning all of us, we exist, but we exist as mere contingencies. In other words, I'm going to simplify a lot of the theological language for you. You exist, but it's not necessary that you exist. You could exist or not exist. If any of us in this room ceased to exist, that would not change existence at all. People are born and people die. God's existence is dururi. It is absolutely necessary. We believe that God exists and everything else exists through God's existence. Everything else that exists is contingent upon God's existence. So he's asking, how do we think that the one that merely exists as a contingency is in a position to prove the existence of the one that exists as a necessity? Right? God exists as a necessity. You know, I was asking about this about 15 years ago. I just made myself sound really old. About 15 years ago, I was studying this point. And my teacher said, God is necessarily existent. I said, what do you mean by that? Meaning, when you see anything else, it exists, but it doesn't have to. It's not in its nature to exist. At some point, our parents loved each other, and they made love, and we were conceived through that process. And then we were ensouled as we were feti. I believe that's the plural of fetus. Usually Latin plurals that end in US are pluralized by I, but I could be wrong about that. Fetuses, feti, what are you thinking? Okay, do you say focuses or you say folky? Do you say alumni or alumnuses? Usually Latin words that end in US are pluralized by I. But so fetus, feti? Fungus, fungi, right? Again, I don't know. Nonetheless, at some point, we started to exist. But it is not in our nature to exist. It is in God's nature to exist, meaning there is never a question of God having a beginning. You know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is one of the most interesting prophetic statements I have ever encountered. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that one of you will have this self-inquiry. And you will say to yourself, just observing creation, who created this? And you will say, Allah. Who created that? And you will say, Allah. Who created this? And you will say, Allah. And then something will say, well, who created Allah? And the Prophet said, don't even attempt to answer that question. At that point, say, Amantu billahi wa rasuli. I believe in God and his messenger. That I believe. That belief in God as the uncreated creator, this is where rational inquiry stops. Because rational inquiry might say everything created needs a creator. Everything designed needs a designer. But if you say, but who created Allah? This is when you say, no, amantu billahi wa rasuli. I believe in God and his messenger. Right? He says, can something other than you, speaking to God, be more manifest than you? In some sense, it is the fact that God's existence is so manifest that we can even deny God's existence. Because it is that consistent. You know, Imam Ghazali, speaking to this very point, he said, if you go out on any busy street, on a sunny day, a cloudless day, and you just poll a random person, what's the most impressive thing you can see right now? He said they will look at buildings. In our time, some people might look at cars. They might look at beautiful people. Some people might look at trees. Some people might even look at the sky. He said almost nobody would say the sun. If I said, what's the most impressive thing that you can see right now? He said almost nobody would say the sun. Even though the sun is the physical source of their existence. They wouldn't say the sun. Why? Because it's so consistent. It's there every day, so it can be taken for granted. He said God's existence is so manifest that it can be taken for granted. It can be forgotten. It can be disregarded because it's that consistent. So he asked, can something other than you be more manifest than you, such that it could make you manifest? Since when were you absent, such that your proof, such that your existence would require proof, or such that we would need proof of your presence? In other words, if God seems distant to any of us, it's only because something within us is incapable of perceiving God's existence. But God is not distant. You know, Sayyid Hussein Nasr, he said the modern consensus of intelligent people that God is a historical fiction, that God doesn't exist, is like people that are hearing impaired, sitting inside a concert hall in which a masterful symphony is being played. But because all of them are hearing impaired, they are convinced that there is no music. Do you hear anything? I don't hear anything. But when one person that has a properly intact function of hearing walks into that auditorium and says, "Do you hear that music? It is the most amazing music I've ever heard," they will say, "This person is deluded because we can't hear anything." One of the things that really compels me about faith is that I have met very intelligent people that were disbelievers, that were atheists. And I have met very intelligent people that were believers. And I have met very unintelligent people that were atheists. And I have met very unintelligent people that were believers. That belief in God is not something, it is not contingent upon intelligence. Not in the way that we typically think of intelligence. It's contingent upon something else. God in the Quran says, ulul albab, the people of innermost core. It takes a certain kind of perceptiveness, a certain kind of awareness to live in the presence of God. But it is not about accumulating facts. It's not about that. It takes a certain kind of perceptiveness, a certain kind of awareness. One of the things that I like to do is talk about the connection between that awareness, mashallah, salam alaikum. Long time, man, you cut the hair, man. Mashallah. Soon you'll be like me. La qadr Allah, inshallah. Allah forbid, inshallah. But, man, you made me lose my point. What was I saying? Not accumulating facts, but something after that. La ilaha. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Was it? No, I was talking about, yes. I was talking about the verse or the phrase in the Quran, ulul albab, the people of innermost core. And there's a good book, I recommend this book for anyone interested, called Islam Between East and West. It was written by, he's now passed on, the former Bosnian president, Ali Izetbegovic. And Ali Izetbegovic, he says that belief in God is something that we perceive through our consciousness, that human beings have this unique awareness of their space and time, their temporality. They have a unique ability to seek meaning. And he says that God is sought through that faculty, that part of you that wants to know not how, but why. Science can tell you how, but no scientist will tell you that science can tell you why. It is consciousness that craves meaning. Why does this happen? Ali Izetbegovic said, it is the same faculty that produces art. Only human beings produce art because it is that consciousness that sees meaning in a sunset. He said, we can give an elephant a paintbrush, and that elephant can mimic a human being and create a painting. They've trained elephants to do that. But the elephant does not see significance that we can discern in a sunrise or a sunset or anything that human beings might capture as art, because human beings are creatures that crave meaning. God is perceived through that faculty, that part of you that is not content to believe that your existence is an elegant dance to nowhere, to nothing. Can you believe? Like, sometimes, don't get me wrong, I think we live in a secularizing and atheizing age. It's all around us. So if you wake up and you find that within your faith, you're just in the doldrums or you just don't feel it, know that modern market society is made to make you not feel it. We're living in a context that strips us of that feeling. This is why when you go to other parts of the world, belief in God is something like that-y. It's like, yeah, of course. Only Western Europe, and by extension America, and then you have some non-theistic religions, but that's different. In the Japan, China, non-theistic religions, but not a cosmology of meaninglessness. They have religions that are not based on belief in God, but they don't have a cosmology of meaninglessness. I don't think that traditional peoples can sustain a cosmology of meaninglessness. Life has too much purpose in it. Life has too much poetry in it. It's like, I don't see how a person can actually live, really experience just life, love and loss, triumph and trials, ups and downs, coincidences, dreams, all of that, and then say, but it's all for nothing. We will just die and turn into dust. It's all for nothing. So all of this significance, all of this meaning that we're groping for, and none of it's actually here. It's all for nothing. No, that's not about intelligence. I would call that, it's a sense that no, there's a purpose, there's a meaning. All of this is too subtle. It's all too symmetrical. It's all too balanced for this to simply come about by chance and mean nothing. You don't have to be intelligent to perceive that, but you do have to you have to be in touch with that part of you that wants meaning. He says, and since when did you, O God, become so distant that worldly impressions would become that which delivers unto you? My God, the eye does not see you watching over it is my God, the eye that does not see you watching over it is blind. You know, subhanAllah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was giving da'wah one day. He was talking to some of the notable, prominent members of his tribe, the tribe of Quraysh. And as he was talking to them, they were ignoring him, they were mocking him, they were ridiculing him. But as he was speaking, there was a man named Abdullah ibn Maktum who was listening and said, Muhammad, these people don't appear to be listening to you, but I'm very interested in what you're saying. And Abdullah ibn Maktum was blind, right? He wasn't sighted. And the Prophet ﷺ frowned at him, abasa wa tawalla. He frowned at him and he turned away from him. Like, kind of like, psst, I'm busy, right? Now, anyone who's thinking, how could the Prophet do that? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. First off, I think it's amazing that we have this captured in the Quran, that he did this and God took him to task. God told him, never do this. Never give your attention exclusively to people you think are socially prominent. Don't do that, because Abdullah was not only blind, but he was also poor. God said, this is a message for anyone who wants to pay attention. Then, and another thing too. I mean, sometimes, I've read this ayah 1,000 times. And I think if I was, giving da'wah or attempting to talk to like Barack Obama or like Michelle Obama or like Oprah about Islam, and as I was doing that, just a cat from the block just said, yo, man, Oprah ain't interested in what you saying, man. Look, what you talking about? I would do the same thing. It's Oprah, man. Come on, man. Give me some space. Like I said, Oprah, look, man, like you've been giving out turkeys and stuff like that and giving out trips and cars and stuff. Come accept Islam. All that will be something that you'll see on the day of judgment. Allah will bless you for that. You're giving your whole audience everything, right? But not only did the Prophet ﷺ go to Abdullah ibn Maktoum and make amends with him. I'm sorry for frowning at you. I'm sorry from turning away from you. He appointed Abdullah ibn Maktoum his mu'adhin. So he had two mu'adhins. Bilal ibn Rabah, radiallahu anhu, he's the mu'adhin that everybody knows. But Abdullah ibn Maktoum was also a mu'adhin of the Prophet ﷺ. And I think this is very important, that the Prophet ﷺ appoint, and this was, at this time, these were some of the only public posts in the Muslim community. These were some of the only appointments in the Muslim community. The Prophet gave a handful, but you had a man who was black, who was East African, very dark in complexion, and they had a colorist society, and Bilal was a mu'adhin. Then you had a man that was blind, and people that were differently abled in traditional societies, sometimes they were cared for, but they were often looked down on. And then the Prophet ﷺ had Aisha, his wife, a woman. She was someone who could answer questions, give fatwa, even when the Prophet was alive. If you wanted to know the answer to a religious question, you could ask Aisha, hey, what's the ruling on this? A woman. So the Prophet ﷺ intentionally empowered people that in the old societal order, people that were overlooked, people that were disregarded, people that were undervalued. So Islam is not an ableist tradition. And when blindness is referenced in the Quran or the Sunnah, there's always a reference to spiritual blindness. There's always a reference to spiritual blindness. And sometimes the example of a person who is unable to see is being used as an example for a person that is spiritually unable to see. But Islam never attaches a devaluation to people that are differently abled. Right? My teacher in Quran, his name was Sheikh Sayyid Hamid Mahmoud. I studied with him in Egypt, and he was blind. He was born blind. He is one of the most amazing human beings I have ever seen, I have ever laid eyes on. This man was incredible, incredible. I will tell you stories about Sheikh Sayyid, you will say, no, get out. So I remember, I was introduced to him by a student from Montreal named Ali. Ali was like, recite the Quran. I recited the Quran. Ali said, you really need a teacher. Come on, I'm take you to Sheikh Sayyid. Right? And even now, if I lead Maghrib, I want you to know, I am the worst of anyone who has ever read with Sheikh Sayyid. Qurra, reciters of Quran, used to sit in his house trembling, reciting Fatiha. That is how his hearing was like sonar or something like that. He was a scary man. But when you walked into his house, you looked on his bookshelf, you saw like cereal boxes pressed down. And it was just the strangest thing to me, like different boxes of cereal, like pressed into bookcases. And I just didn't ask. I just said, There's a lot of stuff about Egypt that I don't understand. Why would anybody smash cereal boxes and collect them? But I just didn't ask. So one day I came early for my class, and his son Muhammad was reading a book to him, and Sheikh Sayyid was punching the book into the cereal box in Braille. That's how he would make books himself. His son would read to him, and he would make the book into Braille himself. And when he finished it, he put it on the bookcase. His whole library was cereal boxes. This is amazing. And I said, but Sheikh, if Muhammad reads the book to you, why do you need to punch the book into Braille? He said, this is for other people who are unable to see. Maybe they would like access to this beautiful Islamic tradition that we have. So I'm making the books for them. Like, just tremendous human being. I mean, I was blown away. I said, SubhanAllah. Now, the funny story about Sheikh Sayyid, I really loved him. And sometimes if I was just in Darasa, I was just in Hussein, he lived in Darasa, he lived in Hussein. And I just wanted to see him. I would just, bad manners, just pop up unannounced, just knock on the door. But whenever I did that, he would just open the door and say, Salaam alaikum, Sheikh Ubaidullah. And I was like, hey man, how do you know it's me? I said, did somebody tell you that I'm coming? Did you get a call? He said, mm-mm. I said, is Allah like revealing it to you through ilham? You know, Americans always think something is sensational. He said, a young student always thinks something is sensational. Allah is like revealing it to you? He said, nope. He said, everybody who comes to my apartment, they have to go up the staircase. And everybody who visits me has a distinct gait. He said, you take the first 2 steps quickly. The next 3 steps slowly. And the last 2 steps quickly. And then your knock is. He said, I have about 100 students. I know all of their walk and all of their knock. Fuqdan al-hasa. When a person loses a sense, other senses become strengthened. I said, you know it's me by my walk? He said, by your walk. I know everybody who visits me by their walk. A tremendous human being. So if you read anything in an Islamic text, the Quran or otherwise, about blind this, blind that, do not associate Islam with ableism. It's using that as an analogy to refer to spiritual blindness, right? Spiritual blindness. But sometimes people that are physically unable to see have the most, my English just failed me. Sighted spiritual hearts. Deep-sighted spiritual hearts, right? She's like, how did I get this role in the class of being like the language monitor, right? So he says, my God, the eye that does not see you watching over it is blind. And any deal in which one does not seek your love as a part of their profit will result in loss. You know, subhanAllah, you know, it's amazing that we are able to marvel over everything that the Hubble telescope can observe. And someone said, if you understood, any ophthalmologists here? No ophthalmologists? SubhanAllah, wrong class. They said that if you understood the complexity that was in the eye, you would be marveling over the eye that is observing everything through the Hubble telescope, right? And here's the kicker. God is the creator of everything the Hubble telescope can observe and the creator of the eye observing the Hubble telescope. That all of that is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of that. And it is all wondrous. It is all wondrous. You know, Max Weber, In describing kind of the rise of modernity, he talked about a loss of enchantment, that we live in a disenchanted world, that the ancients lived in an enchanted world, that everything contained meaning, every color, every sound, watching the sunrise, watching it set, bodies of water, the deciduous forest, it was all wondrous. And they actually believed those to be manifestations of God filled with spirits. He said, but science, it disenchanted the world, right? He said that modern man lives, and by extension woman, lives with a deep disenchantment with the world. We understand everything, but there's no wonder. The Arabs, they say, إِذَا ظَهَرَ السَّبَبْ ذَهَبَ الْعَجَبْ. When you understand how something works, you're not amazed by it. You know, I fly probably 40 times a year. I travel by plane all the time. And I'm probably the only person who never ceases to be amazed by aero travel. I'm just like, bro, I'm in the sky, 35,000 feet, flying at 600 miles per hour. This is amazing. And we have the nerve to even complain. You know, people ask me all the time, Ustaz Obey, how was the flight? How was the flight? It took off and it landed. The flight was wonderful. You think I'm complaining about the little chocolate quinoa thing? I don't care about the Stroop waffle. I don't care about the Stroop waffle. I don't care about the peanuts and the pretzels. I was 35,000 feet above the ground, and now I'm here talking to you. This is miraculous. Sometimes I say to myself, subhanAllah, once we traveled from Egypt, my wife and I, Allah yarhamuha, and because we were traveling against time, we didn't miss a single prayer. We prayed Fajr, and when we landed in Chicago, it was just time, it was like still Dhuhr time. I was just like, yo, we just traveled across the world and didn't miss a single prayer. This is amazing. Like, we didn't miss a single prayer. We traveled from Egypt to Chicago, and when we landed in Chicago, it was just time for Dhuhr. I was like, yo, this is nuts. But something in moderns, we just don't see that. Even though we have more advanced technology than we even know what to do with. Some social commentators say we have godlike technology, and it doesn't even impress us. You could pull out your phone and just access information from far corners of the globe. You're not even impressed. You don't even say subhanallah. It's nothing. It's nothing. Part of what we have to rediscover is the ability to be impressed with the creation of God, to be impressed with nature, to be impressed with life, even being impressed with age. Sometimes, I look in the mirror, I say, man, another gray hair, subhanAllah. That's crazy. You know, you don't see it because my tweezers get to it before that. You know, they say, Obey, what's your secret? Tweezers. Tweezers, that is my secret. But just to think, wow, you know, and I'm totally just on a tangent here, but rock with me. Something that, like, I've recently just been impressed with the power of Allah. I remember going to high school basketball tournaments when I was a kid, and I would look at the varsity basketball team and I would think, man, they look so old. They look like grown men. Some of them have hair under their arms. Some of them have mustaches. Just look at them. And then now I go to a high school basketball game, they're like babies to me. I'm like, look at these little babies. Look at these little babies. Look at his little peach fuzz. Look at his little mustache. Oh my God, look at him. I bet he can smell himself. And it's the same age group, but that's life. I saw them as like, whoa, and now I see them as like high school kids. It's amazing. The only thing that has changed is my perspective. You know, that's amazing. You know, it was a brother, I used to greet him and I'd say, how are you? And he used to say, I'm doing well, man, you know. And he would say, doing as best I can, seeing as though I'm probably closer to the graveyard than the schoolyard, right? I just say, it's just so dark and macabre. Why do you have you? I'm probably closer to the graveyard than the schoolyard. But just that trajectory from the schoolyard to the graveyard, it's amazing. Every time I see somebody old and their skin is wrinkled, I always think they were young. They were young once upon a time. You said really, really old person, like really old. Allah Ta'ala says, "Man nu'ammiruhu faman nu'ammiruhu nunakishu fil khalq." God says, whoever we give a long life, we reverse them in their creation. So that after having an age of full strength, they become feeble again. It's amazing. Yeah, you see, you know, I'm totally on a tangent, but you want to know for me what is like one of the craziest things? Like whenever I just want to think about the power of God and just the rhythm of life, looking at Shaquille O'Neal. When I look at Shaquille O'Neal, I cannot look at Shaquille O'Neal without saying, Subhanallah. Not Jordan, Shaq. Because Shaq came into the league in 92. I was 10 at that time. Shaquille O'Neal was the first superstar that I saw the entire arc of his career. I saw him as a rookie and I was like into the game. When Jordan came into the league, I was a baby. I was aware that something big was happening in Chicago and we all had to like buy his shoes, but I didn't really know what was going on. It was just like, it was something big. But Shaq, I was like a full-fledged basketball fan when Shaq came into the league. And I saw Shaq as like this young, invincible force, like literally tearing the rim down. And then I saw him, an old man, hobbling, limping, barely getting up the court. I saw that. Like, it's just like, damn, man, that's Shaq. Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr. By the passage of time, all human beings are in a state of loss. I saw that, man, that's Shaquille O'Neal. That guy with the gray hair that's always angry at Charles Barkley and bragging about winning rings and seeming old and bitter. I saw him as like a young kid setting the league on fire. But that's life. Even the sun goes down. How can a person not just be like amazed by that? That our state is not permanent. We're just moving through life. Moving through life. But we've lost the ability to say, SubhanAllah, wow. I often have young people that talk to me about faith. And they say, I just can't feel it. I'm like, are you looking? Are you paying attention? Because I see multiple things and I'm just like, wow, that's amazing, man. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. So we'll stop there, inshallah. We'll pray, Maghrib, and then we'll come back for Q&A. As I mentioned, I am the worst of Sheikh Sayyid's students.